Up there 2 weeks ago. Stayed up, visiting some friends. Had a nice long weekend. Stayed up in the Packing district. It's a beautiful, nice area. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We went to the little park that they put out over on the Hudson there. Pods. Then we took the walkway, aerial walkway, High Line to Shard. So it's not the Shard. What is it called? That's the big tall building. That's yeah, beautiful. We went to the top of that. Just what a gorgeous view there. Yeah. Felt very safe. Very safe. It was quite nice. Okay.
We're gonna.
Nothing's closed. Physically closed. Okay. My brother's sure I can do it. This is what you get used to, right? I went to school at TW, George Washington. And then I did my graduate school there. I lived in the city for a number of years. If I don't get the first 5 mark spots, I get upset. So, I just, it's a. That's some fancy spaces that nobody was using. My brother lives just. I'm trying to.
Okay, well,
Quiet part of the town. Yeah, the Dutch church, the old Dutch church, that's the whole hollow, where it comes from. Okay. Yes. One day, dude. Okay, so just be the 3 of us.
Yeah.
6 people.
Actually, Eric was there.
Gotcha.
Eric was here yesterday all day.
Oh, man.
This morning, something happened in the treatment plant.
He's on the operations side.
He's on the operations side, right, yeah.
Someone like him.
That's
He
what.
doesn't control his schedule.
Early morning he had to drive, so he texted.
I got you.
Because he came actually one day before. Yesterday, he was whole day he was sitting there.
There you go. Are we still waiting for Patrick or?
Yeah, he should be here.
One of my daughters went to Virginia Tech, so I used to spend a lot of time driving up and down. And
Up
my
and
other
down,
daughter
yeah,
lived,
yeah.
went to JMU, so we went up I-81 back and forth. Back
Yeah,
and forth.
that reminds me, I don't know if you know Steve Albee, he
Yeah.
retired in EPA. 3 daughters, 2 went to Virginia Tech, 1 to
Okay.
UVA.
Ah.
And he says that in the Thanksgiving dinner, they say, how you let this happen?
So whenever I would drive past UVA, it's much closer for us.
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
If you couldn't have chosen UVA, my life would have been so much easier.
Yeah.
They should put a sign outside that says if your kid went to UVA, you'd already be there because you've got to drive past and climb up mountains and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Going right.
I mean, yeah, we have like the main campus is not here. It's in Blacksburg. Blacksburg we have. It depends on the traffic, 3.5. I mean, it took us, yeah, I mean, but yeah, if you start with traffic, you're stuck. 25 miles is the problem.
Yeah.
How-
I-81 and 66 to a point.
to a point, Manassas.
Yeah.
After
Then-
that, then it's a problem. Just 25 miles is like, I don't know why everyone drives. I mean,
From Virginia Beach where I live to Virginia Tech, it's 5 hours.
yeah, yeah.
So it's the wide part of Virginia.
It's a
by
very
long
wide.
way.
Yeah, high speed drive, 28 miles an hour.
I mean,
Within an hour.
we are more close to Tennessee, North Carolina, West Virginia than
Yeah.
DC. Because, here in Virginia, they call, I don't know, you may have heard it, Nova and Rova. Nova is Northern Virginia. And the rest of Virginia.
Rest of Virginia.
They don't care. Those are mountain people.
Yeah.
Wait until Northern Virginia result comes.
Yeah.
You don't rely on whatever percentage.
Really, there's just 4 major pockets. I mean, DC, Alexandria, West Virginia, Richmond, and
Right.
then kind of Roanoke, smaller, but
Yeah, but still we are mountain people. This Blacksburg is, I mean, what is a Blacksburg, right? If a student leaves, so.
it's a lot of Virginia.
Yeah, all those areas.
All the cities.
I think we should get, yeah.
Are you using microphones?
Yeah, I think we have, there's one.
Yeah, that's what-
That's what-
yeah, that's
okay.
what they have.
Check, 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 check. This one is working?
Yeah.
We're both working.
All right, everyone, good afternoon. So I hope everyone have a good lunch and we're dive deeper into the climate change and resiliency this afternoon. As you can tell, we have 4 panelists originally today, but right now we have 2 panelists here with us. We have one, Patrick is on his way, and also Eric has some work emergencies, so he has to deal with. So unfortunately, he couldn't join us today. But I'm saying this is a part of our resiliency, right? We'll be talking about climate change as well as adaptation and resiliency as part of All the One Water initiative. So before we start, I just want to provide some of the contact about my notes from I have been here from yesterday and today. All the smart water governance and things is all touches on climate change and resiliency already. I think this in the afternoon we'll hear more about from the panelists, their practices and strategies and how to work through this ever-changing environment. And I think we are all impacted by the climate change and sustainability today. You know, we look at the impact from flooding, drought, sea level rises, from the temperature change on to the West Coast on a lot of wildfire and the extreme flooding and the drought as well. So the water sector is essential to manage this climate stressors, as well as how we develop strategies and approaches to adapting and mitigating the threats of climate change through resiliency, adaptation, greenhouse gas mitigation, while still delivering service to the community, managing aging infrastructure and everything else. So today we have a great panel. We have Bruce and Edgar here first. So I'm going to invite each panelist to talk about yourself and also your organization and the work related to this topic. And from there, we'll have some of the very interactive Q&A as well. So with that, I will turn over to Bruce.
Thanks, Tim.
A little better there? There we go. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. I'm Bruce Husselby. I'm the Director of Engineering at the Hampton Roads Sanitation District. We're located I see some familiar faces here, but if for those folks that don't know, we're about 3 or 4 hours, depending on traffic, south of here. We're in southeastern Virginia. Our organization serves 20 cities and counties in southeastern Virginia. And our prime focus is wastewater treatment, collection, conveyance, and treatment. We have 8 large regional treatment plants and 8 smaller plants. We serve about 1.7 million people in southeastern Virginia. And we are a public sector organization. We have 8 governor-appointed commissioners that oversee our organization. But we're pretty much singly focused. So we're very fortunate that way. We're not tied to city government or state government per se. So we're singly focused on wastewater. So that's a real nice bonus for us that we're not tied to all the other aspects of city government, county government. So we can really focus on what we need to focus on. A couple more facts about my role at Director of Engineering. I see Anas Malkawi here. He spoke earlier in the week. Asset management falls within our group. Planning and analysis falls within our function. And then the design and construction group. So we oversee our capital improvement program. So that is quite a significant effort for us right now. We're really ramping up our CIP. We're going to spend, if all things go well, we'll spend $300 to $400 million this year alone. We've got about a $3 billion program over the next 10 years. So it's about $300 million a year. So very aggressive a capital program, a lot of different initiatives from aging infrastructure to dealing with our SWIFT initiative. I'll talk more about that later. Got a lot of other challenges. We're under a consent order to reduce sanitary overflows in southeastern Virginia. So we're dealing with that. And so just a lot of different initiatives, a lot of different challenges. And I look forward to talking to you all more about some of the issues that we're focused on. Thank you.
Edgar Westerhoff. I'm with Arcadis. I've been in New York City for about a decade. Transplant from the Netherlands. I moved in 2012, just a couple of months prior to Hurricane Sandy. My role within Arcadis is all about climate adaptation. I'm the so-called adaptation solution lead. We have a couple more solution leads within Arcadis. Together, we represent a significant portion of our business, of our practice, the solutions that we bring to our clients. So climate adaptation for me is what the world is spinning around, and I'm happy to share a bit more. But do we introductions first, and then we? Shall I continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I mean, I think I mentioned yesterday. I've been here for a couple years now, working with Sunil and his team. Back in 2019, I think we had our first session. 2 years later, followed by several papers that we started to write collectively. I was part of one of the papers, governance and implementation, really fascinating theme as we had a deep dive into the meaning, into the interpretation of, what does governance around water and implementation entail. And there's a lot to it. As we started to write, as we started to bring stakeholders together. We have the New York City DEP through the Delaware River Water Commission, I believe is the translation. You collaborated to that paper as well. We had Waternet from Amsterdam, a One Water, full One Water water board collaborate, water cycle company as it's called in the Netherlands. So that was, I think, an eye opener in the way we started to bring our thinking together. Maybe I can share a couple of perspectives on what Waternet as a water organization brings. By emphasizing a couple of differences, I think, between the US and the Netherlands. I would say there's three things that are front and center in the Netherlands when it comes to water management. It's all about integration. You bring the various needs together in an integrated planning approach. That is vital. You know, we have 17 million people. We don't have a lot of land. It's basically the New York, New Jersey metro area, 70 million people. So there's really no room for error or to mess around with the processes that we have around water management. So that's one. The other one is funding. We have a lot of funding when it comes to water management. Water management is not being questioned, which might be a difference to some of the places in the US. Funding sits everywhere. It sits at the various levels, the federal level, the province, state level, but also the municipal level. We have water boards that kind of operate in a cross jurisdiction. So funding is coming across the board. Everyone has a stake at the table, also through their contributions. The Dutch pay about 1% of their GDP annually to water management, which equals 10 billion people. Gives you a quick calculation what our GDP is. So 10 billion every year is being spent on water management in the country. And that is taking shape through integrated planning. The third factor is policy. So when it comes to water management, the integrated principles, you know, there's rules. You shall comply. There's no such thing as, well, you know, maybe we can do a little bit less. No, you shall follow the rules. And that's regulated by law. So water safety is regulated by law, which is quite different from the conversation that we often have in the US. Definitely when it's to storm surges, flood risk, the Dutch are protected up to once in a 10,000 year. For their coastal protection, inland levels of protection up to once in a 5,000 year, and smaller tributaries up to once in a 1,500 year. So that, you know, speaks to the play at large. So in our paper, we explored the context to that, and I think the paper is currently under review by the Oxford Technical Library, so it can be published shortly, hopefully, with this group of people too. Maybe a few lessons learned from that paper as it relates to the water cycle company Waternet. They went through a transition about 15 years ago, and they used data analytics, the way they worked with that data, mined that data, to transform themselves as an organization into a water cycle company. And that was not a given. I mean, it took them 10 to 15 years to kind of get all the noses pointed in the same direction. But they used data to kind of create that level playing ground with all the participants within their organization. So it had an organizational reason to use data, because they're all using the same dashboard. They're using the same data that is going into that dashboard. So data is not being questioned. Data is not being siloed, which brings a high level of consensus, not just within their water board, not just with the conversations that they have with city agencies, with provinces, with the country, also knowing that a lot of the rules are being directed by the European Union. So it gives a very clear line of command, a clear understanding also through hierarchy on, you know, how things are being run. And that is much needed. And we've seen that even after, you know, our paper was published, there's new circumstances following the floods that we had in Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands last year, 120 casualties, I think, not in the Netherlands, but in Germany and in Belgium, a true disaster. And that ignited a new way of thinking. So we thought we had it all in place. We thought we knew how data was being managed in the Netherlands, and we found out that we don't really communicate across our borders. And that is changing how things are being organized currently. And it's also reshaping a big program that we have in the Netherlands, Room for the River. And that program is about where do you invest? Where do you need to, at what scale, make investments to mitigate the risk of flooding like we've seen last year? And that is I would say, an interplay between our urban centers, say a city of like Rotterdam, which is hosting the biggest delta in Europe, the Rhine. But Room for the River is directly related to that. So where do you make your investments? Is that end of pipe or is that further upstream? And how do you organize yourselves with the stakeholders involved? I was intrigued by the previous speaker, on the rural complexity. Very important topic, if you ask me. So that is changing the rules. It's making us think broader and bigger, which is very much needed. It's not just a public play. It's not just public entities taking responsibility. It's also a private sector responsibility. So when it comes to your water performance, you shall respect the water cycle as much as you can within the footprint of your property. And that's happening various ways, various scales. A funny scale, I think, is that individuals can lift their concrete tiles out of their own garden. There's even a Dutch national championship around that organized. So every city can be part of that annual contest. You can lift your concrete tiles. The count currently for this year is 1 million tiles divided by 11 gives you the square meters of concrete that has been lifted. So again, also that speaks to respecting the water cycle. And that has to do definitely in cities like Rotterdam and Amsterdam of pushing brackish water further down, increasing the capacity of your ground water with fresh water, which is very important. I want to bridge, maybe wrapping up a couple minutes.
Yeah, let's wrap up and then go to
Yeah.
Patrick. Yeah.
For sure, yeah. So all these thoughts, not just explained in the paper, but we also bring that currently to the MWD, the Metropolitan Water District, in a peer-to-peer collaboration, a review where we bring parties from the Netherlands together, along with MWD, who has a fantastic line at the Bay Delta, probably familiar, the Sacramento Bay Delta, where water is being funneled to Southern California. So very interesting line. And also that speaks to, you need to work together to overcome complexities. And in the Bay Delta, that comes with, some big questions and challenges as well. And not in the least, how do you work with farmers that own the land that eventually brings the water to Southern California where they need it so much. That's one example. Maybe in the Q&A we can elaborate a little bit more on New York City and some lessons learned there.
Great. Thank you, Edgar.
So Edgar, we're not going to hold it against you on the World Cup. So that's just between it's not over yet. That's just between you and I. Maybe you'll get your first. First of all, my apologies for arriving late. Technology is great when it works. I double-clicked on my calendar invite and it sent me to the other side of Arlington to a different Glebe Street. So I'm sorry for being late. First of all, I'm humbled and privileged to be here to engage with each of you. I haven't had the opportunity in a long time in front of all of you to say thank you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I mean, what you have all done during the pandemic and past that, you're all civil servants, and you make a choice to do what you do. And what you do matters. And I used to say a long time ago that the only finite resource in the planet is water, which is true physically. But when you think about it in terms of the other resource, it's time. And the thing about time is that none of us know how much of it we have or those around us. And that's why purpose matters. And you all have purpose. I don't have a doubt in my mind about that. I have a formula that time plus purpose equals impact. So what you all are talking about here and what you're doing here is a big deal. It's a big deal. We at Xylem, I mean, we're a technology company in the water space. We've been around for a number of years. Global organization, work with you and your peers around the globe. And in our view, there are three big challenges that we're focused on. First is we say scarcity of water. You could say access. Scarcity is not just at a household level. It's also, industry that are operating in water stressed areas. And I say the value of water to industry is not the cost per liter or gallon. It's when they have to stop operations. It's lost profits, lost revenue, or they end up moving their operations from one location to another, and it has economic losses for a community. So scarcity and access is the first big challenge. Second is resilience of infrastructure to climate change. And I think, you all see it every day. We're seeing it on the news every day. Unfortunately, this is what it takes to get people's attention, is that the combination of climate change and water infrastructure is, whether it be aged infrastructure or underdeveloped infrastructure, is not well suited right now. And there's lots of money flowing around to be spent on this. And that comes to the third challenge that we see. And that is, how do you do all this in an affordable way, both at a micro level, at a household level, but also at a community level? And our angle is that the technology and solutions exist today already to do things in a much more affordable way than they ever were before. Lastly, I'll wrap up now and say, I think that all of you as leaders, and I hate to say water sector because water sector makes it sound like it's some other thing going on. I mean, water runs through every part of society. So when we talk about water, my view and our view as Xylem is that we have the opportunity as leaders here to talk about energy consumption. Nobody probably on this planet is more responsible and more committed than every one of you. And if we together cannot lead the charge around reducing energy consumption and getting to our carbon neutral goals, then I'm not sure who the hell is. Pardon my French. It's just not going to happen. So we'll do it. We'll do it together. And again, the solutions and technology exist. So with that, I'll wrap it up.
Thank you, Patrick. It's always humbling to hear from you as we are working in the water. I'm not going to say water sector anymore, just hearing from you. We're working together to solve water problems here. So first question I have is, as you can tell, we are here having the utility representative consult. I have the mic here. As the consulting as well as the tech solution providers. I do want to ask a question, as the conference is hosted by Virginia Tech, and thank you, Sunil. And as the big part of the academic is the part of this ecosystem working together. Now I want to ask, as Patrick, you said the technology is already there, but clearly we see there's lagging things and things that we haven't been advanced and implemented. What are the roles for the academic partners? They can help us. What are some of the research questions that is the key that graduate students or academic partners could help us to answer regarding climate change, regarding resiliency? And so I'll start. Go ahead.
Is it working? Okay. And I would throw this out to our friends here. As I said, technologies and solutions already exist. They do. I mean, we look at our R&D funnel, we look at our M&A pipeline, meaning, mergers, acquisitions. We've got the capital. I'm sure Arcadis does and others do to put money to work. So technology and funding is not the issue, in my personal opinion.
Mhm.
What I would love for academia to do is help us create a movement. A movement amongst youth, an awareness of the challenge, an awareness of the opportunity, and how do they get involved? That's why and I'm not here to toot our horn or anybody else's. I mean, we signed a partnership with Manchester City Football Group. We joke about football, sports. It doesn't matter. I don't care whether people like football or not. It doesn't matter. The point is, 5 years, we have 1 billion plus social media impressions through that partnership. And the demographic is between the ages of 13 and 22 years old. And when surveyed, 34% of them said they have a strong affinity to water and climate, and that they've actually done something over the last year in that effort. That's a big deal. All we're doing is creating the space for the conversation. So what I want from academia is, I think we need to build structural programs in universities. Nobody taught me in business school about any of this. I don't think anybody on this panel, we didn't talk about this in business school or whatever school we went to, but it's a big deal. So I would say structure around programs and education, and creating the space for students to be a part of that, and bring us in. I mean, we're going to learn a ton from them as to how we actually make a difference.
Very good.
Sorry about that.
So obviously this conference and this group is an excellent source for these issues. And I think academia can take a lead role. In our area, the Coastal Virginia Resilience and Adaptation Economy Consortium, boy, that's a mouthful. That's led by Old Dominion University, but there are many public and private sector partners involved with that. So I really think academia could be the facilitator for a lot of these issues, right? Because we can't do it. Climate change, sustainability, resilience, we cannot deal with all these issues ourselves. It's not going to get solved by any one group. So we really need some folks to kind of herd those cats, get folks working together across different groups, whether it's public sector, private sector. And this group is composed of working groups, and they're focused on things like local best practices, infrastructure investment, resources and capability, and talent gaps. So those are the areas that this group is focused on. And I think that's just one example of many that are out there. And I know Virginia Tech is leading the way in many initiatives too. So I really think academia can be that driver that brings groups together. You're in a unique position to do just that.
Like what we're doing today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe to echo your point. I mean, Old Dominion indeed is very active in this space. I have the privilege to be a faculty member for Pratt University myself. So I think to all of you, you have a responsibility, to teach. Go out there and tell these students what is happening in the real world. So the way I look at it, it's a resource, and we can tap into that resource much stronger. And that's not like a free ride for the industry. That can also be a paid effort. The knife cuts both ways, or should cut both ways. I think that realization, looking at my own city, New York, there's a climate adaptation center in development that will happen on Governors Island. It's all driven by academia. So there's academic consortia that are driving that competition, which is vital. It speaks to how you can unlock the data, the knowledge that is there, and work it with industry partners, work it with investors.
That's great. Thank you, Edgar. I'm curious, anyone from the audience here have any thoughts or want to add on to additional comments? You?
No, I agree that academia has a role to play. Patrick, I think you brought up a good point. I think the significant sea change is going to be who are going to be the next customers, because there's firm entrenchment in who are the existing customers and what we haven't done before. The one question I would ask, Patrick, is that I understand the evolution of technology that's really there now, and really the impetus and momentum to go. But in the actual governance structure as to how water is in the US, if we speak about the US context, that certainly creates an added challenge where it's not necessarily just about it structurally prevents barriers for the access to capital. As I brought up before earlier, we're seeing all of this momentum in a broader context of water conservation, the ESG push, net zero, and everything else that's really there. Water is not a player, at least in the utility space as it is right now. It'd be interesting to find out from each one of you as to where from that sustainable business model push and alignment with current global trends, do you see that we need to emerge as to paying focus to tapping into existing momentum that's there to elevate or need to be a part of that funding and that conversation?
Great points and great question. I'll try to be very pragmatic on this. We've got more than 80 large water utilities around the world that have signed up already to a kind of race to zero, neutrality pledge. And the one that I find to be most encouraging is in the UK. So in the UK, we've got 15 different large utilities that are regulated by it's called Ofwat. It's the Office of Water. And every 5 years, they have it's called the UK AMP program. It's an asset management program. And more than 10 years ago, they were all forced to sign up to a major reduction in carbon emissions. And over that time frame, and I'll talk about technology in a moment, they've actually cut their emissions by more than 50%. And they've done that at what we would say neutral cost, meaning it paid back, or negative, meaning it actually paid them back, because energy consumption is a big deal for water utilities from a cost standpoint, OpEx. So there's already a roadmap there that a number of utilities have done. Now, water's local. So, what it is in the UK is different than what it is here in Virginia or DC or New York or California. I mean, it's all local. But the point is, it's not like it's not been done before. That's one. Two, they did that through technologies that are affordable. I think that when people hear about high tech or digital, they think expensive. It's not. I'm going to give one example, and then I'm going to hand the mic over. One of the big challenges that utilities around the world face, which is not about carbon emission, although it leads to that, is stormwater overflow. When there are major storm events, and that's when we get people's attention, is when water's flooding into their basements or their buildings or factories are shut down. And one example we use, Pete Buttigieg, our head of transportation here, former mayor of South Bend, one of the acquisitions we did, and we're not alone, other companies are doing these things, so this is not a Xylem commercial, we're not doing infomercial here, is using data to build digital twins around a community to help them manage stormwater overflow. And it was going to cost $850 million to fulfill EPA consent decree, and we're helping them do it now for about $275. Still expensive, a hell of a lot cheaper than $850. And again, just one example of many of things that are out there that we can do once we get awareness and we get the conversation going. And I'm sure, Arcadis, you all have plenty of examples. I'm not doing a paid infomercial here on Xylem.
Yeah, my perspective, I think, to your question, if we were to break down the one water paradigm, the different components, and you bring those components back together, but then each component with its own business case. So what is the financial justification if you bring that puzzle back together, which will be different from region to region? I think that is a conversation that is still to happen to quite an extent. And I think there's a lot of opportunity and need to have conversations with the broader watershed owners, communities out there that may not directly benefit from what is happening downstream, but they're part of the same cycle. So how do you bring them into the equation in an environmentally just way? So I think that the business case as part of that breakdown is where we need to make steps. And maybe I'll pause there. Some more thoughts on that, but that's where I pause. A couple of examples. For example, Harris County Flood Control District, right? Post Harvey, how were utilities impacted, and how can the prairie lands be utilized to contribute to lessen these future events to happen? So that broad understanding beholds the solution. But then you need to bring it back together, and that is a step Houston still has to make. So there's opportunity. We understand the issues. We have worked the data, but now we need to transition into, and that's governance. That's exactly what we try to capture in our paper. We need to reorganize ourselves, lifting the silos of responsibility to bring the situation back together where we can resolve it. And that is a tough step to make in the US, I've seen.
But they're really, I mean, the beauty of this for me is it's already happening. It's already happening. So, and utilities and city works departments around the world, they far better trust each other on these things than they do somebody like me showing up trying to sell them something. So it's about creating movement amongst utilities themselves. And what I say to our colleagues every day is, again, I don't want to sound self-righteous here, but spend a day in the life of, utility or city works department shoes and what they're up against, what they're dealing with every day. And again, how do we create a movement amongst youth to be inspired to come into this space, to be a part of this? This has not always been the sexiest space for people to go get a degree and work. And part of what we're doing as Xylem and others is trying to create excitement around the possibility of, hey, if you're going to spend your time and purpose to create impact, maybe it's around water. It's the essence of life.
I'll just give a quick example. Our SWIFT program, I think, highlights a lot of those one water factors, and I'm sure you heard about that yesterday in Beate's discussion. But generally, we are regional authority, so we can take a bigger view. Water does not know a city or a county or a state boundary. It could care less, and many of our citizens don't care. They're paying their bills, they're doing what they're supposed to do, and they're expecting answers from us. So we need to find innovative solutions. We need to think bigger. So our SWIFT program, we're taking our treated wastewater, we're bringing it to very high levels of standard, but we were just dumping it back in the Chesapeake Bay or into the rivers or into the Atlantic Ocean, just wasting that water. And we said, if we just brought that water to a slightly higher standard, we could reuse that water in a really thoughtful way. So our SWIFT program is really building water plants on the back of our wastewater plants, bringing it to drinking water standards, putting that back into the aquifer, and solving so many issues for our region. We are limited on our groundwater supplies. There are a lot of industries that were going to be cut with their permits, so that was going to be a huge job issue. Huge issue and we're not putting nitrogen or phosphorus back in the Chesapeake Bay, so that's a win for us. But there's other huge benefits too. There's land subsidence issues in Hampton Roads, next to New Orleans. We're the #2 city that is impacted by climate change. So it's a function of rising waters and land subsidence. So if we can address some of those issues, and about half of the land subsidence, based on USGS's information, is due to taxing the ground aquifer too far. So if we can put that water back in the ground, repurpose that aquifer, replenish it, it's a huge issue. And also saltwater intrusion. If we can raise those groundwater levels, we can minimize saltwater intrusion. So we tackle we tick 3 or 4 or 5 different spots to address that issue. And I don't think if we were a city agency rather than a regional authority, we would have never been able to think this way. And actually, the governor's coming to our region next week to take a look. You read about the article in the New York Times, didn't even know about it. He said, hey, that's in Virginia. I'm going to have to go check that out. So he didn't even know what we were up to. So we're doing some great things, but the people in this room can find those innovative solutions and then just propose it, because there are ways to get win-wins out of here.
That's a great.
At the risk of overstepping my boundaries, Hampton Roads is a rock star. You are. I mean, in terms of innovation, what you're doing here. So I just want to make sure I call it out in front of the here. Okay. Hampton Roads, rock star. Hampton Roads rock star. There are many other rock stars here. I just, all I'm saying is I say it's at risk of saying it because I realize that it's a high threshold. But I do want, for those that don't know Hampton Roads, you've long been a leader in innovation around the whole issue of social responsibility of water. So I just want to say thank you.
Great, thanks, Patrick.
Ting, if I may, Bruce, and I agree, you're a rock star. You, Bruce, as well as so at Beata, right, Carollo Engineers. What about because I feel like there's a story here that you guys can share on how you did the right thing. You didn't wait for the regulators. You kind of brought them along, and the policymakers, and they had to say yes. They had to say yes. So I think there's a story here. Many of us don't do that, right? And I think that you almost embarrass them by being late to the table and not having any other choice, because it is the right thing that you're doing. So is there anything that you could share there on how you did that and it might help others?
So we've looked at water reuse for a number of years. We were providing reclaimed water to a refinery in Yorktown. We actually provide reclaimed water to Purina. They make kitty litter. And we provide water for those folks too, but that was at a very small scale. And the water purveyors in our region were not particularly happy that we were taking their customer base. Once again, we're getting into this turf battle, right? So we kind of quickly figured out that trying to steal the water purveyors' customers really wasn't going to be in anybody's best interest. And also, we were building these reclaimed water facilities with a specific customer in mind, building a pipeline. Well, that refinery closed, and we had a huge investment with that individual business. And we were also picking winners and losers. So if you start providing water to some industries and not others, who gets that water? Who deserves to have that capability, right? Because it's a valuable asset. At the end of the day, people are starting to realize that now. So we just said, let's put it in the ground. Anybody can get it at that point. It's not our water. We're giving it back to the cities and counties that we serve. The Mother Nature groundwater is the conveyance system for us. We put it back in the ground and everybody has access to it. So we're not picking winners and losers. We're getting out of the business of not taking water purveyors customers. This is for people that are using groundwater industries or other folks that aren't using drinking water. So it was we got away from having to have a loser when there was a winner.
Great. Any other question here?
Yeah, thank you. Patrick, you had mentioned that a lot of the technology you feel already exists, and I think that's a great point. But given the regulatory framework around water and wastewater utilities, I think, Bruce, you gave a great example, and Beata, nice tee up, by the way. But can you maybe go into a little greater depth into the mechanisms that we can use to help expedite technology adoption as well as foster new technology and creative ideas? I know Solomon and I were talking earlier today, he's got his own startup. Like, how do we help these organizations that probably have something great for utilities, but don't know how to bring it to market?
Sounds like more of a Xylem question, but I'll tell you what we did. So we built a research center. It was actually going to be a demonstration facility. Initially, it was going to be a demonstration facility to demonstrate the technology. And it was going to be a Butler building surrounding some treatment processes that we were going to fiddle with. That's where the project started. And it was about a $10 million project. And we quickly realized what we needed to do was not convince ourselves that technology would work. We had to convince the regulators and we had to convince the public. We had to get past that yuck factor, right? So we built a $20 million research center. And it looks like, if you've ever taken a tour of a brewery or a winery where you can walk around and see all the various processes, it looks just like that. And it's glass encased, and there's research areas, and there's stuff for kids to play with. And you're right, Beata, we really kind of guilted folks into approving this. After they saw all the benefits, they couldn't say no. So we gave them every reason to say yes. That was a $20 million investment, but we're investing $2 billion. So when you're investing $2 billion, you can spend $20 million to convince yourself that you're doing the right thing. And we also got some we created our own blue ribbon panels to make sure that we were doing the right thing. So we took on that responsibility. We actually worked with some of the universities, and I think it's a Virginia Tech, ODU, and I believe there might be one or two other groups that are on this blue ribbon panel. But we said, you guys oversee us. You make sure that we don't do the wrong thing. And if we are, let us know. And we took it off the regulators' back a little bit by creating this Blue Ribbon Payment Group. And, Upper Occoquan had been doing this for many years. So we kind of stole their great idea and took any ammunition that the regulators might have a reason not to approve this and took it away from them at the end of the day. Anything else on the technology side? I can't answer where technology.
No, I think I know you said it well, Bruce. I mean, I think and Kevin, you know this. I mean, I think it's pilots create the valley of death in terms of water innovation, because we can pilot stuff until the cows come home. And so I do think that we need to find ways to create a procurement mechanism whereby these things are going to get stuck just being piloted. Oftentimes, you got to have 3 bids and a buy to be able to do something. But in kind of things that we're doing, there aren't 2 other competitors. There's only 1. So how do we work through that? So pilots are oftentimes the way that we have to do it. And it's a pain in the ass, pardon my French. Because it's like, we know it's going to work. I mean, we're not, again, I'll speak to, I'm sure I can put words in your mouth, Edgar, we're not going to risk the reputation of Xylem by putting something in front of a utility or a city that's not going to work. It's called due diligence. I mean, we're not stupid. Okay. You can't fix stupid. So we're not going to do stupid stuff. But we've got to get the public's mind and our utilities and our governments and policymakers to realize we're trying to do the right thing here. And we talk about this a lot within Xylem. And again, it's not just Xylem, but Kevin, I talk about you have to be able to focus on creating economic value and social value. The 2 go hand in hand. I can't build a sustainable enterprise of Xylem to help solve water issues 50 years from now if we're not focused on doing the right thing by our people, by our communities, by our customers, by technology. Just do the right thing. But there's this skepticism around for-profit companies that we're all in this just to make $1. And there are a lot of companies that's true. It's not the case with us. I'm sure Arcadis, you said the same thing. We're not doing this just for, kicks and giggles. We're doing it because we believe it's the right thing to do. And I go back to time and purpose equals impact. I'm an optimist. I've always been an optimist. I'm a skeptical optimist. But this water issue and challenge will be resolved. My father always said, every generation thinks theirs is the last one. Somehow we figure it out. And I'm convinced we're going to sort this out.
Well, maybe to add, a New York City engineering perspective. So Arcadis is the lead engineer for the Big U, for the protection of Manhattan, and that's where we, realize how big the responsibility of, the utility is, New York City DEP. Because as soon as you start to bring coastal flood protection in a complex environment like Manhattan, and you need to think about your drainage system, which requires a complete overhaul, it shows the responsibility that a utility is given to take, I think, to take a responsibility that's bigger maybe than they were equipped to handle. Let's put it like that. And that is for parts of the town that will see a plan, that have a plan currently. That's where, we as engineers, we help resolve those issues. As much as we see that the problem is really complex, definitely in an existing urban environment. But there's also the spaces where we don't have a plan. Right, for New York City, 540 miles of coastline, about 40 miles has seen a plan, and that plan might see engineering, and that might see a solution where utilities are part of the play. But what about the 500 miles where we don't have a plan, where sea level rise is slowly taking over utility assets, including outfalls and drainage systems, where drainage is going to work against communities instead of for communities. That is a sea level rise challenge. Who owns the waterfront? That might be a park's responsibility. But it's all spinning around the utility because they have their assets in the ground. I don't think that is widely acknowledged as it should be. And again, if it's part of a project, it will see, a solution, because that's why we are engineers. We help answer our clients' questions. But where that's not the case, we have some big fish to fry ahead of us. So I'm pretty skeptical with the sea level rise numbers that we'll be on time for that exercise. And maybe that's also for Hampton Roads. That's also a challenge for you guys. How do you? Maybe that's a question I may ask you. So how does sea level rise play into this equation?
It is a huge issue for us, and it's a philosophical question, I'd argue too, because we've talked about berming our wastewater treatment plants and raising them up 20 feet. But if every customer we serve is underwater, what good is that? Is that a smart investment? So we have to work with the cities and counties in our region to come up with a solution that serves all of our customers. We could also spend a whole lot of money raising our facilities and probably afford to do it, but they couldn't afford to pay their sewer bill. So is that a smart investment? So it's a huge challenge. We have to take a regional approach to getting past that. And one of the things I've mentioned about our SWIP program, we kept finding benefits in this program. If you think big, the benefits just keep coming. One of the other side benefits of this was the fact that each of the cities and counties in our region had a stormwater NPDES permit that they had to hit. They had a TMDL limit. They had to get nitrogen and phosphorus and sediment out of their stormwater program. We're taking out so many pounds of nitrogen and phosphorus from our treatment plants that we're not discharging to the bay. We gave them these credits for free. They don't have to make any investment now in their stormwater program, or actually they can be targeted and spend money in smart ways dealing with flood issues rather than dealing with a stormwater issue that has minimal benefits. So we're giving these credits. I feel like Oprah Winfrey, you get a card, you get a pound, you get a pound. We got so many pounds to share. It's just not an issue for the cities and counties. Our ratepayers are paying for the SWIP program, but they're not going to have to pay it on their stormwater bill.
Very smart business model there. Other questions?
Can I do one paid commercial advertisement in the spirit of collaboration here? So we announced about 5 months ago, just not too far from here, although I couldn't get the directions right, on 301 Water Street in the southeast part of DC. We announced an opening of, it's called Reservoir. It's a reservoir center for water solutions. We as Xylem also have a very small space there that it's our corporate headquarters, but you wouldn't even know it if you went by. There's no signage on the building. This is a free space for collaboration. And I would invite every one of you and anybody that that actually cares about water, if you want to use the space, it's open, it's collaborative, all the support mechanisms are there. We as Xylem, we can be involved. We don't have to be involved. We had a lot of people there yesterday. We weren't in those meetings, but I would invite all of you to use that space. We got a couple of people here from Xylem that can reach out to you. Lindsay being one of them, Kevin being one of them. We got others, but use the space. And we don't have to be involved. It's just use the space to have a conversation around the water challenges. I think you'll find it to be a very impressive space. It's a very confidential space. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything. Our only request are two. One, be a good neighbor. So if you're using it for your own meetings or anything else, don't be noisy. Don't leave crap lying around afterwards. And two, if somebody else that has signed the pledge asks you to be a part of some conversation about a water challenge or issue they're dealing with, 6, 7, 8 times out of 10 show up, either in person or remotely. But it's part of a conversation. But again, it's called Reservoir, and it's 301 Water Street Southeast in the Naval Yard. That's my paid commercial advertisement.
We'll check it out. Here, question here.
Sure. I've got a question related to economics. Thinking about some of the top goals, resilience and net zero. I'm thinking of resilience in terms of solar cells, having resilience if your oil or natural gas is cut off. And can you comment on that and what you see going forward in your organizations Right now we've got over in Europe, oil's being used as a weapon. So that's kind of what prompted this thought, but it seems like there is a connection between resilience and net zero. One last point on that, if we have an earthquake or natural disaster, your solar cells, your oil pipelines could be damaged. So it's not a one for one, but that's what my question is.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of thoughts. I think resilience and sustainability, will go hand in hand. In the past, when resilience as a word, as a verb didn't exist, and we were talking about, climate robust strategies, it was very much about, defense. Think Katrina, 2005, the response. It's concrete, it's walls, it's gates, large scale engineering. If that would have happened again, it probably would have taken a different shape, including working with nature. So building of nature is like an ultimate example in adaptation on how to do things better. Also knowing that there's simply not enough money to protect our communities with higher end engineered, constructed, concrete, what have you, strategies. So nature-based, I think, allows us to work in tandem with nature, lowering carbon footprints as a result of that. There's many examples to that. Maybe I'll start with the Netherlands. The largest dam in the world north of Amsterdam, the Afsluitdijk, 30 kilometers, 20 miles, had to be upgraded as a result of sea level rise. And that is not like the conventional way as it was built back in the day. So it's very much about understanding the carbon footprint of the overhaul, the reconstruction, the reinforcement as a whole. So the construction process was taken into consideration. It's generating its own energy. So there are solar panels that operate the locks, the dams. So it's a climate neutral, an energy neutral dam as a result, the first in the world. There's also a fish connection between the sea and the IJsselmeer, the fresh lake. So there's all kinds of features brought to that dam that speaks to sustainability, which we would not have considered a few decades ago. I think, and that's just a couple of examples embedded in one strategy. There's other examples as well where nature-based strategies like in New York, living breakwaters, for example, that will protect Staten Island.
You've got the most effective treatment, filtration in the world, and that's your sand dunes.
That's part of it too. It's working with your own asset, like what is already there, the sand engine. I mean, building with nature. Utilizing sedimentation processes instead of calling the Army Corps who will pump up a lot of sand on the beach. That is not sustainable. So what other practices are there that you can utilize to lower, increase your carbon performance?
But just talk a little bit more about resilience. Obviously, we've all faced COVID recently. So when COVID hit our organization, we sent everybody home. Our engineering department all of us went home, 50 folks went home, worked from home. And a few months after we sent everybody home, we were hit with a ransomware attack. So we were down. That's like an earthquake and a hurricane hitting the same town, right? I mean, so we were belly up for a while. So we've had some lessons learned on being resilient and really focusing on business continuity and really working to make our programs a lot tighter, working closely with our IT folks to make sure we're better ready for that next 1-2 punch that might hit us. And then Ting asked me another question earlier about innovation. So I'll share one more thing that I thought would be relevant. So we have a team at HRSD, it's called our Salt Chaser team. So I didn't really think it's that innovative, but it's kind of innovative when you think about it. So horrible when you have a lot of groundwater getting in your sewer system. It's not designed to handle a lot of groundwater. And that groundwater is highly problematic because if you get too much salt in it, it affects the treatment process. And now that we're putting water back in the ground that's in drinking water purposes, bromide becomes an issue even for our wastewater. So it's a huge issue to have salt water in our sewer system. But salinity is something you can trace and you can find the source of that. So we are working hard to put in a lot of meters in our sewer system to pinpoint those leaks in our system. So to get that water out. So we're trying to take what's really a bad problem and turn it into a win there by creating this team. And it's a cross-departmental team. We have our data group. We have our operations folks, our instrumentation control folks, And we have our water quality folks all looking at this issue, working together as a team to find these infiltration and inflow locations, which is more important to us now that we're actually getting in the drinking water business and directly with issues that we have to address. So
I'm just going to add something to maybe not shift directions, but just bring another dimension in this. So metrology, something we got into a number of years ago. People think about metering as, revenue creation. Of course, big deal for the utilities, but it is around the performance of the network. And so leakage, the industry term of non-revenue water, which is not a very user-friendly term. But so there's that whole dimension. But the other thing we see right now, which I'm not saying we go down this rabbit hole, but as water becomes a much more appreciated asset in the world, it is the essence of life. Only finite resource other than time on the planet, cybersecurity. So if you talk to utility operators around the world, whether it be Singapore, Israel, you just go around the world, cybersecurity is a big, big deal for them. And really more from the physical contamination of water in terms of disease, obviously biological warfare is a concern, but also, the number of users, the number of clients that water utilities have and the data they sit on in terms of personal consumer data is a big deal. So I throw it out there just as something we don't talk a lot about in these kind of forums, but that's big on utility operators' minds.
Definitely. Data security, cybersecurity. I think utility, especially during pandemic, everyone's relying on this digital infrastructure. So I'm glad, Bruce, I know that it's a big hurdle for you all, and I'm glad everything's working out. But that's important as we are relying on the digital infrastructure. And I also want to get back to Ed, your question there too, just to chime in a little bit utility experience from my perspective from West Coast clean water services. So we do face risk of earthquakes. So we are involved in a regional planning team on how do you identify the vulnerabilities of infrastructure and how do we work together as a region when there is the earthquake and things. There is the supply chain as well as we kind of part is the pandemic and how do we get polymers or chemicals when we need it to do the water and wastewater treatment. One of the initiatives we are looking into is looking to this what if scenarios, because there's so many unknowns and things that it's hard to look into all of this, but we do need to have a plan to be able to respond and address it quickly when things coming up. So I'm curious about how you work through, essentially it's a risk management, how you identify your vulnerabilities and identify some of the what if scenario based planning to help you navigate through this resiliency.
Well, maybe a first couple of thoughts. I think the reality of climate futures is becoming more pressing. So are we keeping our temperatures below 1.5, or will it be 3, or will it be 4? All these numbers relate to what might happen and what is further down the road. And that relates, in my opinion, to stress tests. Understand the performance of your asset under extreme circumstances. And it's known in the banking, the financial world. You do a stress test and you see what the outcome is. But as utilities, do you know what is happening down the road? And we touched on a lot of topics already, but I think sea level rise or salination or earthquakes in your case, there's a lot that can go wrong. Cascading effects of that, compound risk, extreme precipitation plus sea level rise. So what is, if you add those risks together, do you understand or what could happen in 20 or 30 years down the road? And are capital plans as they currently exist ready to anticipate what is about to happen? Because I think the future is quite dire in that from that perspective, and we will see, I think, places that will not succeed, and there's a lot to learn from that as well. Disasters have a lot of benefit in terms of learning from the outcome. We will see a lot of disaster in the near future where we need to learn and bring those experience to others who can bring them into their stress test planning.
Data is knowledge, and data is cheap. So it doesn't cost us a whole lot. So the more that we're able to capture data around the performance of assets and networks and communities and use that knowledge is got a huge return on investment.
Great.
I was talking to Ting earlier. We're in the middle of updating our strategic plan as an organization, and we are using scenario planning to help us kind of go through that process. And really, I think that scenario planning came from the military. They looked at, what if we have to fight China and Russia at the same time? They look at all these scenarios, and then they have to have a plan for each of these scenarios. So the military kind of started that concept, but obviously it applies to lots of businesses. So we as an organization, our leadership got together and said, what are the biggest risks that we have? And one was new regulatory requirements. It's not a hurricane, but it can be worse than a hurricane sometimes, right? And then one of the other ones was our customers willing to pay for what we're trying to provide to them? Are they willing to pay us? Is there going to be customer revolt if we get out of the range of where we should be? Our rates are going like this and inflation's like that. And MHI, as our median household income can keep up, one day it's going to be it's a big problem. So we are looking at those various scenarios. And I think what you do in the scenario planning, from what I'm understanding, is you kind of play out what would happen and you look for commonalities between the scenarios. And if you can say, well, if I do this, that'll take care of these 3 or 4 scenarios, that's a good thing to do. Even if you don't know if they're going to happen for sure, it resolves a number of problems across the board. So if you can look at those scenarios, find solutions that take care of as many scenarios as possible, well, then you've got a good solution there. And you don't have to do everything today, but you really have to be doing some things now.
So glad you are doing that, Bruce. Go ahead.
In my previous job as a utility owner, I'll just make a comment. One of the most interesting things by doing those types of plannings that I learned is that in these situations, if you're in a disaster, you need people to do the work. And unless you take care of their families, you can't have those people do the work. So you also have to consider, are we going to house the families? Where are they going to stay at the utility? And those workers won't even show up unless you take care of that part. So the people's a huge part of this disaster planning that I think we lose sight of. The technology, the equipment, the things are there, but it's really the people that we also have to plan for.
I think that's also a big quality in the US. I mean, the first responders, the line of command, the hierarchy, it's all pretty clear how things operate before, during, and also right after an extreme event. The question is longer term planning. It's a different ball game. But from a disaster response perspective, I think the US in general, utilities, communities are really well prepared. Bring that again to my home country, and you overlay them with a disaster, a levee breach. People have no idea, which can be quite problematic if you live 6 meters below sea level, and going to your chimney will not going to save you. So I think that's a huge quality. But then the longer term planning, that is where we all need to make big steps.
Leadership matters. I always say, being very English language here, simple and easy are not synonyms. Okay, what's simple actually is difficult to do, and what's easy is complicated. And look, I talked about time plus purpose equals impact. We as leaders, I always say one of the most important things we do, all of you, is you create the culture and the climate of your organization, whatever that organization happens to be. What gets people up in the morning and motivates them to do what they do. And it doesn't mean they're going to be working at Xylem or any one of these organizations the rest of their life. That's not my point. But I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can every day. And I make 10 mistakes every day that I know of. And the ones I make that I don't know of are probably even worse. But people have to know that you actually give a damn about them. And those are hard choices. Sometimes budgets don't allow for certain things that you want to do. Then you got to do something that's not financial, and the most important thing is you're out there on the front line with them a day and the life of. It's not complicated. It's hard because we got choices to make. But you're right. That's why I started my comments around the fact that no matter what each and every one of you do, the fact that you've chosen to be here and be a part of this conversation, it matters. You give a damn. It's a big deal. I wish we had hundreds of thousands of people in this conversation.
I'm just,
You do harder work every day.
me personally, no, but we've got great people that do. I would reiterate that point that you made there. That was, I talked to some folks from after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and the thing that they don't like to talk about is the number of people that committed suicide after that. So many more people died from killing themselves after that storm than died during the storm. It's amazing. There are so many people that live at the fringe of our societies, and just one little thing, like not one little thing, one huge thing, anything puts them over the edge, and they can't deal with these scenarios. So, and we've got employees that are probably in those groups too, and we've got our citizens and customers. So we have to plan for these things. We have to plan for these things. It's a life and death decision.
Just to add on, Bruce, to kind of echo Lauren's comment there that, how important recognizing the people is. Recently, Bruce, if you recall, we were talking about scenario planning. We're thinking, if a hurricane event happens again, and it's something like what happened with Ian, our facilities are not designed to withstand anything more than a Category 1. So in that case, in that scenario, when there's a mandatory evacuation, do we tell our employees to leave also? Or what is important to our community? Do we maintain a certain level of service in our treatment plants? Or what's important is our people and let them leave? Then the thought also was, well, there's going to be some people that stay. No question about it. Every community, there's people that just stay put, right? Are our facilities even better than the community facilities out there? Can we make our facilities kind of a safe haven for our employees at least, and maybe potentially open it up for the community and work with the region to see if our facilities can, and maybe start designing our facilities to a place where, that's part of our scenario planning also.
And I would encourage you in the spirit of just informality here, and I'm sure I speak to everybody here and others in the space. Ask for help. I mean, we are always looking for ways to give. It ain't all about making a dollar or profit. We want to do the right thing. We do a lot of work in our organization. I'm sure Arcadia does, and obviously Hampton Roads. I mean, we all do. We wouldn't be here otherwise. This is a community. And so don't be afraid to ask for help, because we don't know how to help. We think we do, but we don't always know. And we could create safe havens. I mean, whatever it happens to be. So I love the point you're making here. What's your name?
Honest.
Nice to meet you.
My name, I'm Marley Franzen with Fairfax Water. I want to add on to that comment. Fire and police are incredibly important, but at the end of the day, they're going to also need the operations staff to stay back and sacrifice, not leave the area. And, it was a sin during COVID that when the vaccination rolled out, that water utilities were not prioritized. If we really want to take a proactive, meaningful, and doable step, it's making sure that these operators are also treated with as much respect as police and fire.
So, yeah.
Well said.
I want to add on that too. Marley, awesome. Honest, I agree 1,000%. What you just illustrated there was what we were talking about again, about being in the community. You're a community asset and developing relationships so that they understand that we're, first responders, that we're essential to life. And that's where our sector isn't doing enough of that. We're not thinking right about it. And if we do things like that, we are now the community, and they get it, and they get what we are. And we have to change the culture, the absolute fabric of what we do, because we're talking to ourselves, and we got
Youth movement.
absolutely the
The old
youth.
song, we're not gonna take it. I mean, this is not rocket science.
Yeah.
Well, it all shows, I think, that you have to be out there, right? And that comes with a process to your question or observation. You need to be out there to communicate what is happening. And it's almost like having a procurement for the sake of defining a process and have the opportunity to be out there. Because if that is lacking, that's when people will feel left behind. And if something were to happen, then there's nothing. They feel left behind. So a lot of the resilience planning work that we do, if it's New Jersey, the more regional planning, it's very much about bringing these voices to the table to hear what they have to say. What is driving them personally, from going to work to how they spend their weekends with their kids close to the water. What are the issues in the environment that they observe? How can you make that part of a planning process? Not for the sake of getting the shovel in the ground per se, but really hearing what is driving them. And I think that is number one when it comes to the resilience planning work that we do for our clients, having a process.
I would add just one more point to that. We talked, everybody here, many of the people here probably have kids, and you get a snow day, right? The school will close school and it doesn't snow, right? And then everybody's, mad at the school for closing schools when they didn't need to, and yeah. Imagine maybe not. But in the wastewater world, if there's a huge hurricane coming and you evacuate and you let sewage run down the road and that storm doesn't hit, that's an issue. So we've talked about making sure that our automation is such that we can run our plants remotely, at least for a day or two, so that we can cover that day where actually that hurricane doesn't come, and we can still run the plant at least at a minimal level to make sure we're meeting a minimal permit requirement. And at the end of the day, you've got a choice of meeting a permit or evacuating and potentially saving lives. I know where I'd be. Hopefully everybody else knows that answer too. I'm not sure everybody does in our organization, but hopefully we'll get there.
Part of a scenario planning.
Yeah.
There. Well, time flies. I do want to ramp up this panel. So we already talked a lot of the things that we haven't done or we wish we could do better, like being part of a community, like you said. So I do want to invite each panelist to talk about one thing we're not thinking or doing enough related to climate change and resiliency. So I'll start with Patrick there.
This guy, I don't know. Maybe somebody's listening. They can't hear me. I'm going to be a little bit more existential. I think it's a movement amongst youth. The technology exists, the money exists, the capital is there, the engineering talent is there. It's a movement, and I just think that creating awareness of both the challenge, but also the opportunity. And I go back where I started, and that is it's scarcity or access to water. It is resilience of infrastructure in the midst of climate change. But foundational, it's how do you do it in an affordable way? And I just think that when people, and I'll wrap up, when people hear these huge price tags that are thrown out there to fix water infrastructure, as if it's a sector as opposed to life itself, they get stuck in the politics of fear. Where's the money going to come from? And our view is it's affordable through technology and people just getting smarter at what we do every day. But that's not going to change, in my view, without youth being the ones that say, we're not going to take it anymore. Let's put one foot in front of the other and make stuff happen.
Thank you.
Well, my number one would be sea level rise, which is about to claim millions of acres of prime waterfront land. Also realizing that the big urban centers, they will get a plan, that they will be fine. But what about the people again? That they don't have a plan. What is the approach for that? And in New York, we've been blessed with a competition, Rebuild by Design, which helped jumpstart a lot of the planning. I think it's time for retreat by design. We need to think really deep about what the implications are going to be, because in 15 to 20 years, water will be breaking the waterfront edge everywhere. So what is that reality going to mean?
I think, as I said before, I think these issues are too big for any organization by ourselves to solve these problems. So we need to work together. So I think our organization, we're trying to build better partnerships with the cities and counties that we serve. we can't solve this problem by ourselves. They can't solve it without us. So we all have to be in there. And the only way we do that is by building partnerships, getting to know groups that we haven't normally had to deal with in a collegial way, or just working with folks in a thoughtful way, because the ratepayers, people pay their town, local, state, federal bills. There's enough money sloshing around. We just don't have it focused in the right places necessarily. And if we, pool those resources, we can be a lot more effective at getting great outcomes. We had a little project. This is just an example. We have our consent order to reduce sanitary overflow. So we're trying to find places for storage equalization during rain events. And guess who wants a sewage EQ tank in their backyard? Nobody. So we worked with the city of Virginia Beach, and they had a park, and they wanted to replace their dog park and their skate park. Guess who likes dogs? Everybody. So if you can tag that type of project together with a dog park or a skate park, you got a home run there. So those are the types of opportunities we need to find and continue to look for, because the people expect no less from us.
That's a great. Thank you, Bruce. All right, let's see, we got a few minutes. We can take one question or comments or.
I think they're tired of us.
Well, it's a big topic. We talk about New Orleans, we talk about seawater rise. Those are big topics, and I'm hoping everyone will think about it and how we can learn a lot of things from the past. And there's a lot of things, the actions, call to actions we can work on. So Sunil, you have some of the great work.
Yes, I was waiting for the audience. I don't want to take their time. Yes, I have a question, maybe last question for this panel. Yesterday, we talked Smart One Water. One Water is coming from seeing from water cycle point of view. The smartness is the technology which is bringing the Smart One Water. But second panel, we talked about the scale. We don't want just a Smart One Water to make one utility, but at the scale of either watershed or river basin scale. The question is governance of that, because there's too many stakeholders in basin, Delaware Basin. Just take example of Delaware Basin. There are 800 utilities there, fishery, recreation. So stakeholders are very different for water. So what's your thought with the technology? Is it that technology will enable, or we have to work for the policy side first? So what is your thought in implementing this Smart One Water concept at river basin scale?
Can I be provocative? I'm not gonna put Bruce on the spot here. It's not his decision. And I'm not gonna put you, Edgar, on the spot, being another industrial user of water. One of the things that I just have never, I've been in the water sector for 15 years or so now. I've never understood this. The relative value of water to someone. Like, why would businesses and industries not pay a disproportionate amount of a water bill versus somebody who makes the least 20% of incomes in the US? I don't even know what my water bill is in Xylem, and I'm a water company. I couldn't tell you what we pay for it. I guarantee you a pharmaceutical company has no idea what their water bill is. So why don't we have some type of relative valuation of what people pay for it? I don't know the answer to that, but there are countries around the world that have a rate mechanism in place, Australia being one of them, that have a rate mechanism in place where it's the value is based upon the proportionate value of water to whatever your enterprise is. I just don't understand why we can't do that in the US, other than the fact that we have 50 states, counties. I get all that complexity, but I think, again, creating a movement amongst youth to say, let's just deal with reality and be fair around the value of water would be a pretty provocative concept. Probably not going to happen in my lifetime, but I put it out there.
So this is where WaterNet comes into play. Their rates are 70% of what other owners and users pay for other water boards, and that's because of the mechanism and how they are organizing themselves. So I think the takeaway of that is quality governance is invaluable. So to your point and observation that this is like a broader watershed, bigger challenge. Maybe we need like another government entity. Maybe we need like a Delta or Estuary Commission. Maybe that's part of what we need to accomplish along the East Coast. Create another board entity that stitches the counties and the cities, municipalities, the states together, but a responsibility that is solely about water management. And that could be an informing entity where academia contributes. And there's a lot of value to that. So when it comes to governance, I think my opinion would be we are not done with the way things are organized in the US.
Sure don't have all the answers, but I do see a lot of large industries that want to locate places, and they are water hogs. Whether it's server farms, these big places where they're building these huge servers. They're in our area, they're building these huge electrical systems that are coming over, data systems coming over from Europe. And they have these huge facilities that they're building in our region that are just huge users of water and generate obviously a lot of heat as part of that process. So they're going to find a place to be, and they're going to find the value of water. And I think as we move forward, as our rates go up, as those challenges go up, we're all going to be more, aware of the cost of water. Also, these places that are making just all sorts of circuits, they're bringing a lot of industries back to this country. And that industry is going to require a lot of water, and we're going to have to solve those issues. So I believe that the water challenges we'll address them. They'll locate in places where it makes sense. They're probably not going to be in Arizona, too many in Arizona. Yeah, so we'll see these issues resolve themselves, and I think we've got crazy smart people that are going to help us make that happen.
Sunil, if I could add to that, I think that's another call to action for research opportunity to look at the business economics of examples globally. We do see structures that are hybrid of what Patrick mentioned, as well as Bruce, in the watershed world where there's watershed entities, which comprises of hundreds of stakeholders of industry, utilities, even CAFOs, but their membership is based on their water impact by acre or by hectare. And then that's how the pricing structure then lies. And it's also based on if they're managing multiple assets or multiple permits. It's a business model, right? It's a business framework applied to a watershed organization. But it'd be good to look at other business models or frameworks globally and do the research and understand what are some plausible frameworks moving forward as recommendations.
I think just to add really quickly, this is all about education and awareness. I keep going back to that. I keep saying youth, Lindsay. I mean, we talk about this a lot. Very few people in this room, including me, would even know how many watersheds there are in the world. The greater world doesn't even know what a watershed is, let alone how many of them there are. And then what's the value of different constituents on that watershed? I think for academia, just to create awareness and curriculum around that I'm sure any of us on this panel would be more than happy to contribute to. And anybody in this room would be, to again create awareness and education amongst youth, and then they'll figure it out. I don't know the answer. I don't think any of us know the answer, but they'll figure it out because they're smart minds.
I want to add on to the academic role involvement here too. I think we talk about water quantity, and water quality is more on the point source-based discharge, the DO, your temperature, your BOD and stuff. How can we truly look into the watershed health? What are the ecological benefit and outcomes we're discharging? So Bruce, you talk about the SWIFT program and the benefit and the things. I think that's part the academic you can influence and with the partners. I do believe, like Adam said earlier, everyone wants to do the right thing, want to do a good thing, but how we can use science and data to inform better policy decisions, regulatory compliance, to truly focusing on the outcome versus the single point by point regulatory compliance there.
I agree. Great. So I think we have to close this panel, right?
Thank you so much, everyone.
So we take coffee break and then we will have our
Great.
last but powerful.
Great
panel.
presentation, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Just one of many.
Great to hear your remarks, Patrick.
Thanks for having me.
I'll stop by your water reservoir there.
Bruce, I will give you my card. I didn't have at that time. It was great.
Yeah, yeah.
We did have all that panel was
Yeah,
great.
love
We are
to
recording also.
talk with
Yeah,
the
that's why
Xylem
we will
more
prepare a
about
white
partnership
paper.
and things.
We are not doing this
Yeah.
just to people come talk and leave.
Lindsay, I used to talk with Al Cho as well.
There's
She-
the overflow room where you are having a time, so they take notes there. Because it's the same, what you are talking, everything is available.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, because I think I remembered first is coming from Al saying about this reservoir, and we are having this space at the DC area and things, so.
Sustainability. I talk sustainability in a narrow term, how to sustain level of
Yeah.
service. And then resilience is how to